Okay, so a little bit of a difficult part, and it's a part that requires a lot of time and attention, is the knee joints. Now what I've done is I haven't glued these leg supports, I'd like to call them, or leg armour, because if you do glue them, it's a double-edged sword at the moment, because if you glue them, then it's going to add more stability to the leg itself, because you've got 4 extra points of contact all pulling down on it and supporting that. I'd say quite thin. It's sort of quite thin, but the weight is distributed quite nicely along the toes. But what I'm trying to say is, if you do glue them, you're going to support the leg, but also you're going to hide the detail in there. And yeah, there are arguments for and against that. You can glue it because, you know, people aren't really going to see the detail in there, but if it's going to be hard to get the detail there as well. And yeah, for a model this expensive, in my opinion, it is better to leave these off and spray the skeletal frame of the Titan. And then once it's all done, you can paint these separately, like I did with the Warhound, and then you know, glue them in place. But what I'm going to draw your attention to today is this knee joint itself. It's quite an odd knee joint. Typically the Warlord and the Reaver Titans, their knees are just knees basically. So it's one piece of the thigh and one piece of the lower leg, or the shin, and you just slot it in. With this Warbringer, they've added this extra bit, which gives you, well, much more posability, but for a kind of heavy weapons platform, I don't know whether we needed it. We definitely needed it for the Warhound and maybe the Reaver, maybe even the Warlord, but this Warbringer, adding this extra piece, it complicates things, and it's a bit of a nightmare, a bit of a pain, especially that they've got a plug and socket system for the knee armour section too, because before, again, I'm comparing it to the Warlord. The Warlord's armour piece for the knee and the thigh is just one huge chunk of resin, whereas this, it's got this really thick piece here that has to kind of fit in there slightly, and it fits in, you know, like so, I guess, but then when you put the leg on like that, it's gonna stick out. And that is unavoidable. It's just going to be one of these things where the armour piece itself sticks out. Now you can surpass this by moving this knee piece, as I'll demonstrate with this one, because that one's glued. So this one here is unglued, and essentially what we're doing here is you can have it rest like so, but then if you have it rest like that, you're going to have your leg, your top thigh, at such an angle there. So it's a really tricky place to be, because if you've glued, like me, such an upright angle, 3 pieces here that are competing with each other, if you've glued it at such an upright angle like I wanted to do, then you're going to be limited with this bit. Now you can move it with the knee, so like I've moved mine up a little bit, which you can do. Like so, which means, yeah, so you can have it kind of like that. But again, if you want the leg to be quite upright, like I'm going to have mine, it's going to be tricky to get this armour piece correct without it sticking out too far. Now this is a thing, they're going to be competing with each other. So at the moment you can either glue it you know, straight upright, and then you've only got to worry about the level of the upper leg, or you can have a mixture of both. So you can glue it at a slight angle and then have this as upright as it can be, which I think is a happy medium. But you've got to be aware of where the body of the Titan is going to be. If it's like this, it's going to make the Titan look shorter, and the last thing we want obviously is it going to be looking shorter than a Reaver Titan. But still, having it upright, although the armour plate goes quite forward, it will allow you to move this upper leg a bit more. You've got a bit more freedom to move that upper leg, but of course you sort of want the armour plate to be in line with the upper leg. So that's why just test it and fit it. If it's too far over, then the armour plate itself is going to look a bit silly. But likewise, you know, this leg has the ability to go all the way over like that. But yeah, I wouldn't advise that. You want, because then that's going to put a lot of weight on the back. You want it as kind of upright as possible and pushing all of the weight directly down, because it's going to be very heavy on the top, that macro cannon, and then you've got the weapon arms as well, which aren't too heavy, but it's the macro cannon more than anything that weighs an absolute ton. So that's why I've gone fully upright on this one, and I'm going to have a little bit of a slant on the other one. And I'll show you once I've glued them both in place, we're ready to make the hips level. Now then, once you've got your knees, angles correct and things, what you should really be doing now is working out how your hips are going to align. So my advice is to sort of dry fit them and make sure that the upper thighs are as close as level with each other as possible. Now take notice of the light. I've got light coming from there. Light has a trick of making things look different. So what I would suggest you do is switch off any kind of lamp you've got and make sure you've got as much natural light as possible to get these two lined up. You can use a ruler, I've got that at the background, or you can use a spirit level to try and get these hips as central as possible. This is one of the things that will make your Titan look level or not level, depending. So it's worth getting it right. And once you've done that and you've leveled these off and you've glued them in place, up to you which glue you want to use. Probably better to use the epoxy resin for the knees, but if you have to break these parts off later on because you made a mistake or something, it might be worth just using the super glue, because that will cause less damage to the pieces if you have to break pieces apart. Once you've done that and you've aligned these up, the next step is to get these big boys, these big pistons. You know which ones they are because there's only 4 of them, and you're actually going to attach them right here all the way up to there. Now Will has done an amazing job designing this model in that there's enough space for you to actually glue these on to the knee joint, which will give you more support. You can paint them after. What I'm going to do with these is actually glue them on. There's only 4 of them. I'm going to be able to get in there and get some detail around them. It's just these kind of foot pistons and these kind of toe pistons I'm not going to be, and armor pieces I'm not going to be able to, especially if they're covering this piston as well. So I'm leaving these off, but I'm going to be gluing these lower leg to knee pistons, and I think these are the right size. Yeah, basically what they've done is they've given you a really long actual pistons themselves, which is fine. You just need to snip them. However, there's not much of a hole in there, so yeah, it's a bit tricky because it doesn't give you much room for error in terms of that, in terms of snipping them and getting them just right. So just be careful of that. You may want to drill a hole deeper in there, and then at least that way you've got more margin for error. And if you ever wanted to, and if you do make a mistake in terms of cutting them, and then you've got a larger margin of error in terms of you don't have to clip them as much, and it's better to drill a hole deeper than it is to clip too much off a piston, in my experience. However, the good news is that typically you won't need much more. I mean, even if you were to angle your leg completely upright, you're not going to need much more on top of that if you were to reposition it later on in a fully upright position. What I would do is, even though I'd clip these, I'm sort of having a war with a fighter jet outside at the moment, but yeah, I would clip these and then keep this extra piece keep the extra, don't bin it. Just in case, and just in case you need it for future, or you need it for another piston or whatever. But what we're going to do is we're going to return to this model once the thighs are glued and once these 4 pistons are glued.